All right, welcome back. This is the Something Venture Podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I'm your host. My guest today is Poe Bronson. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's great to see you.
It is so good to have you. So Poe has quite a career. He gave up, I think, an early and brief stint in finance. I think it was bond trading or something like that, to become a chronicler of Silicon Valley, writing more bestsellers than I can recite. But Bohemian's First 20 Million is always the hardest news on the late shift, and then shifted to the human condition with things like books like What Should I Do With My Life and Why Do I Love These People. Still writes for numerous publications, and is now the strategy director for IndieBio. That's probably a third of it, but those are some of the
thanks, Ken.
Of the highlights. And a member of the Writers Grotto, right?
Yeah, founder. Yeah.
That's still moving along, right?
Still thriving. Yeah, it's the country's oldest, biggest, most thriving writers community. I would say that it's a workplace for writers. It was the original WeWork. We just didn't realize we should have systematized.
That is kind of funny. That's true.
It's 23 years old. It has 125 writers. It's right across from the Clock Tower building at South Park, and it's still going strong. Though the life of a writer is drastically different today than it was 15 years ago and 20 years ago.
And the Grotto is a place where writers can kind of come together, get out of the house, support each other.
Yeah, so it was meant for working professional writers. That the world of a writer is often focused. In the old days, it was focused on getting published, and everyone wanted to get published. Mm-hmm. And we were focused on, well, when you're getting published a lot, when do you give up your job and actually make a living as a writer? And we created a community around that. Yep. And that grew, but getting published was no longer any harder. You could just put your stuff up,
Right.
And gradually we saw this sort of degradation of the ability to sort of regularly make money as a writer for a lot of the writers. Yeah. So it's still working professional writers, but they're not necessarily full time. They often teach. They sometimes do corporate work on the side, that kind of thing.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. What is your sense of, having chronicled the Valley and gone through a lot of different things, what does it feel like to you now? The last podcast I had was with a guy talking about whether dramatically, like Silicon Valley had sort of lost its soul or changed and become more transactional.
Oh man, I don't have that feeling at all, Kent. I really don't. I can't. So I read it very, very differently. Yeah. So I go around in the day, and you can have meetings all day and conversations, and you can talk shopping, you can talk deals, you can talk startups, talk transactions, you can talk human movement, you can talk gossip, like talk money, talk problem, right? Customer validation, customer development. Every step that we've done, being lean, being rich, whatever it is. Yeah. At night, drastically different thing happens. I've been thinking about our subconscious process, and I would argue that right now we're at the other end of the spectrum where the conversations being had at night are so different than they are in the day. And let me kind of describe this. I sort of describe this as where Silicon Valley gets its ideas from. Long before there's a startup, long before there's something for an angel investor to come in or a seed round be thrown at it or anybody to write about it. These ideas germinate from this sort of primordial soup of confusion, this subconscious stuff. So we take our guilt, we take our frustration, and we displace it into our subconscious to be worked out in some other way. And so at night, I can increasingly see people going to forums and salons and conferences where they come out after 3 hours saying, I don't even know what that was about. Uh-huh. And maybe I had one intelligent sentence all night. I don't know why I went. I don't know if I'll go again, but they do go. And what's happening, it's almost like a biological mutation. They'll sit around talking about, like one of the world's problems, world hunger, or what's life going to be like in 2069, or what are we going to do about aging, or whatever it may be. And they almost just randomly mutate their sentences. It's virtually like with a little bit of a hunch, they'll say things like, will the metaverse be decentralized or centralized? I think that's an important question. And no one understands what it means. Right. A few people can, or actually that's a quite evolved version of it, right? They're just sort of throwing out terms like the world, we need to find technology that allows us to value our internal states of mind as highly as we value our possessions, like our yachts. And people don't know if it's meaningful. It's trying to be thought leadership. It's like gibberish, and but someone hears a bit of it, and to them it makes a little bit of sense, so they repeat it the next night. And in this way, it kind of like RNA constantly mutating DNA, it kind of like evolves a little bit into, slowly people grow aware of a kind of a paradigm or a thought, and in this sort of way, we're dealing with some of these things we don't know what to deal with. We do with things we've put off, whether it's climate change or dramatic inequality or the fact that government doesn't do anything,
right.
or gender equality, or whatever it may be, and we just sort of displace all this, our relationships, and I believe that right now we're to me, this is more like 1994 to me.
Okay.
I feel like we're having maybe 93. We're having very different conversations at night than in the day, and that difference between day and night is actually a measure of how much sort of subconscious activity is going on. And I believe that we're in for some really ripe and significant changes as a result of it, or a new era, because out of the subconscious comes creative activity.
Right.
So we're going to see some really, really sort of creative stuff that's going to sound really weird and stupid to lots of people, and isn't going to stand up to the rigor of logic.
Yeah. It's amazing to sort of watch the transitions. I feel it in picking, say, income inequality. Mm-hmm. You kind of know it exists, but you live in your bubble in San Francisco and you don't think about it. For me, like a place where that, for example, has come, Uber didn't exist not too long ago, and now it does. And when I get into one of some of the cars sometimes, I'm very conscious all of a sudden of oh, this is a guy who lives in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And he's being nice to me and, carrying on a conversation, but he's trying to get by, and he might not be doing that. I just feel this sense of oh, I'm sort of sitting in the back of a car, and some guy's trying to scrape by, I'm touching it in a way
right.
that I haven't in the past, and maybe I'm being dramatic about that, but
So do you feel like people? I actually, again, I don't. I know we live in what we, there's certainly a bubble factor, but I think I look at it as a bubble as when people in Silicon Valley don't care about people elsewhere. Just that fact that you resonate with that. I think people in Silicon Valley do care about all these problems. They don't actually know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And that we have what I call a thrift class supporting this sort of economic engine, and the thrift class is powered by Silicon Valley. It's driven into its sort of low income state by network effects in economies. So it's sort of fundamental, but at the same time, one thrift class member texted me, it's never been so entertaining to be poor. We've created so much really cheap and free entertainment, so many new brands that compete at IKEA prices, so many sharing engines that allow you to have everything, and that people kind of almost live sort of virtually online, can look great online and look like you're having a blast, and even if it's only occasionally, and in this way, we're sort of simultaneously making it easier and easier to live on less money. 70% of our society has less than $50,000 a year.
Right. What an incredible... I guess there is the concept of if you were the richest man in the world in 1820, you still had a way worse life than somebody today. I mean, you still had to take a train to get across the country, and didn't have an air conditioning on your train, and no matter how much wealth you had. So do you see income inequality as a destabilizing problem, or something that's just sort of in the natural? Is it something to be solved and addressed?
Yeah, I do, because I worry that it's going to undermine economics itself, that it will drive to a point. Over at IndieBio, we argue about this all the time, but I'm of the belief that in order to get better, it almost has to have kind of a 9/11 moment. that it's only going to get worse until we drastically do something about it. But it has to get drastic before we'll sort of wake up to the problem.
Right.
And as a sort of chronicler of this, I feel like I'm singing like a canary, but I also know it ain't gonna do any good. Like, not enough people are gonna listen, and something really drastic has to happen. And 2008 wasn't it,
right? Yeah, it is interesting. I say this to my friends sometimes, is we all have things that we're kind of mad about, like climate change, but also, I'm not sure how much people actually do. In other words, there's climate change, and you're mad at some Republican who doesn't believe in it. Like you'll do that, but you're not going to cancel your trip to Thailand on the airplane or stop eating meat, or you'll be minimally outraged and kind of recycle, which may or may not have something to do with it. But in terms of really like changing your life or doing something about it, people are busy and
Right. Well, and rightly so, I would say, because the personal choices we make are not where the issue is. As much as people want that to be a solution, the solution really is in energy markets and in automobiles and in burning coal for electricity and in permafrost and in methane being released from all of the tidal waters. They are global problems. And, so even if I didn't take that trip to New Orleans last week, like that isn't the issue. And in fact, in that particular case, sort of, we can afford biofuel for planes. Like, that's okay.
Right.
We just need to do it more of it. But the fuels have come far enough that we can run our jets on biofuels.
And what kinds of things do you think would crack something like income inequality or climate change? Like, what types of things would have to happen?
Disasters.
Okay.
Yeah, and I hate to say this, Kent, because I want us to rationally do stuff,
right.
But I don't think that's going to. I don't think we will. I think we have too entrenched powers, and I will say this is particularly in the United States, it's probably most egregious. Because of our oppositional system, but the fundamentals of that opposition are true everywhere around the world. A lot of people are stressed all around the world. They're fighting all around the world with each other, arguing over these things. I think that we need, or that what will happen. I won't say we need it. I'd say, unfortunately, I think what will happen is it will have disaster levels, and then people will start to do something about it. Right. So in climate change, the kind of disaster that it might take, it's not about like water coming up. It's really about probably human sickness as related to climate change. It's always got to come back to sort of the human factor. In inequality, it would be a stalled economy, where like not enough people are working. Right now, only 1/3 of our society works full time. If not enough people are working and being paid enough, if economic growth started shrinking, that was so fundamental.
Right.
And stock markets were crashing. If stock markets are crashing, there's a group of the 99% called what I call the asset class. It's the next 19%. Their income is going up in their jobs just a little bit, 2.1% year on year. But they feel very wealthy, and they're driving the kind of nouveau luxury economy because their housing prices, their housing values are going up, and their stocks are going up. And as soon as that started to go down, those people would feel no longer wealthy, and we would be in trouble. Right. And so economic activity would suddenly sort of start to fall, and that would cause dramatic changes.
Right. Yeah, I've always been intrigued. I mean, as automation comes along, whenever they have employment numbers, there are things like, 3, 4, 5, 10%, 6% unemployment.
4%, 3.8%. Yeah.
It's always just struck me as peculiar. Like, how is it that you have a society and somehow it takes almost exactly that many people to produce all the stuff that society needs? Like 96% employment. Why not 4%. Like, oh, it's just we're really efficient and 4% of the people can produce everything. Or
well, arguably we are. I mean, the number of people who are classified by the Bureau of Labor Statistics as left the workforce is 95 million people. That's 10 million more people in this decade, and 9 million more during Obama's term as well, right? So more and more people, and they're not old enough to be retired. They a portion of them, like 11%, are actually stay-at-home parents. The others may be taking money under the table and not reporting it, but they're not an Uber driver. To be an Uber driver, you do drive one day, you count as employed.
Okay.
So when they're not part-time workers, there's 35 million part-time workers who average $261 a week. It's not much money.
Wow.
We're talking about a bunch of people who are sort of unaccounted for in our society. And so we're moving increasingly towards a thing where we'll go from 1/3 of society is working full-time to 1/4. More people working part-time. But in the end, half of society it'll take half of society to make everything, and then it'll take 1/4 of society to make everything.
And at that point, is that when we get our civil war, or people go crazy, or is that a good thing when we get to that point, or is it?
Taxes. Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard. Is that when taxes will go up? Yeah,
right.
Basically, there you go. That's it. That's what it'll take. When and look, I'm not trying to be denigrating of anybody here, but when people at the very top, and they're saying it today, but when they see when their economic value is only going to go down because the entire economy is going down, they're all going to want the economy to go up. That drives their value. And if they can see that there's some difference, I wrote a piece recently that the governor read and contacted me, and he's trying to work with Silicon Valley to try to figure out its future tax structure and what do we do about this. Yep. And he's really trying to kind of solve this in his first year. And but I do think it's going to take basically the economy really, really kind of stalling out and getting a lot of media stories saying it can't grow fast. Nothing you can do. You can't juice it with monetary supply because not enough people make more than $261 a week.
Is this where the universal basic income ideas come in?
And Andrew Yang, running for president, supporting this. I love that idea. Whether it's feasible or whatever happen, I don't know. But that's the sort of thing that could come out if it got really, really bad. Like if the economy just really cratered and people said, let's do it this way. I think the sort of political feasibility of it would require an even bigger disaster than what I was talking about, where we just use taxes to sort of help people out more.
Right. Yeah, that's another one I've always wondered about is how, with universal basic income, how do you keep people from just factoring it? I've always wondered. Like, in other words, you're like, oh, you get $1,000 a month. Like, how do you keep people from just buying a bunch of TVs with it and committing that capital through a debt instrument for the rest? I mean, it just seems like a practical thing to me. That would be a problem.
Right. You just sell off your future universal basic income for like $1 million right now. Yeah. And
and then go bankrupt, but then what?
Right. And or cause dramatic inflation, possibly. I mean, people are studying these things. Yeah. I think that what people, I just don't think it's in our country where this huge inequality problem is so severe. Like, it's interesting that in the places where they can do it, they already have a 47% tax rate or a 53% tax rate. So it's not that drastic for them, and so it's more politically feasible. I just don't think we as a society are close to that.
Now, were you working on a concept along these lines of universal equity, basic equity, or
it was like 3 years ago, and I was really studying future automation, what was going to happen, and how society was going to unfold. And I was doing a lot of game theory and sort of drawing out these scenarios. And that's where I kept only finding these sort of crisis scenarios would lead to these changes. I was working as a futurist, an old Wired colleague, Josh McHugh, and it started to occur to me, kind of like I said earlier in the podcast, the sort of the random mutating of words to sort of see if that's the idea. And one morning it came to me is kind of hypocritical that Silicon Valley we're talking about universal basic income. We're built on equity. When I was on the cover of Wired in summer of '99, it was generation equity, right? We give equity to the workers, and then they work their ass off, and then they create something of great value. We're an equity-driven industry, right? And why are we talking about income all the time? Like income for others, but equity for us.
Right.
And it fundamentally felt like, those who own the robots will have all the money, and the people who don't own the robots won't have any money. And is there a way to distribute the equity there and to think of it more as equity rather than as income? But what that means, I'll be honest with you, Kent. It's like this subconscious thought, right? Like it means whatever you want it to mean. All I knew is that when I typed universal basic equity into Google that morning, there were 0 results.
Wow.
I was very excited about that. It's like, maybe I'm on to something.
I have one new idea.
Yeah, I've actually had a new idea.
Here in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And when I typed in Silicon Valley subconscious a few weeks ago, there was nothing of that phrase.
That's it.
Not that it gives you 0 results, because there's plenty of
course,
results around the different words, but nobody had put the words Silicon Valley subconscious together.
It seems so odd to me. It seems that if you're that wealthy, what you really want is you want to be wealthy in a stable society.
Yeah.
So rather than having $2 billion and having so much income inequality that you're worried about people storming your mansion, you would somehow rather have $1 billion and the same mansion, but without people trying to storm it. It doesn't seem that people really think that way, though. They seem the 1 billion turns into the 2, turns into the 3, and
I have I had the privilege of working with some old money billionaires over the last 4 years here and there, brought in to do some consulting for the day or this or that, and I'm surprised how many can in the course of an hour kind of mentally get their minds around this and start to feel this sense of urgency and worry. I'll just I won't name the person, but owner of a really significant, famous pro sports team who could look at it through the lens of, how will my fans be able to buy tickets? How will my workers couldn't come to a game on their off day. They never could afford it. And just looking through their own little sort of spot of the economy, they could see the problem and emotionally connect to it. So, but again, I just don't think that's how things work.
Yeah.
Intriguing.
So what is the future? You're a futurist in a lot of things.
Yeah.
What do you see in the future of picking one thing? We're talking about sports. Where's the nature of, there's esports now. Everyone declares baseball to be boring, football to be dangerous.
Sports is fascinating because it resists technology. It's the fundamental concept is this is played with the body and not with the technology. And so it was an interesting place to start around futurism because people like talking about sports, but also that it was it's like us wanting to push tech on sports. It pushes back. And not just culturally. I mean, it's just harder to find actual good uses for the technology in sports. And tons of things are tried, and then the physical trainers and the athletes sort of blah, that isn't helping me. And that would therefore it was sort of a microcosm of the overall issue around society also rejecting technology even as it accepts it, technology pushing back against it. So the future of sports itself, I don't think is going to be drastically different. When everyone was savaging the NFL, I was saying, and they're saying the ratings are going down, I was saying, no, since the heyday of NFL and the mid-'90s with Brett Favre and Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and all that, and the Niners, the the American audience for sport had 900 million viewers, and it was now up to 2 billion. It had doubled while it was falling. Right. And the biggest difference is that in the 90s, 3 games a week were on TV, and now there were 6.5.
Right.
And so any one audience might have ticked down a little bit, but over the course of a season with a longer season, and then you throw in college football and all this stuff, that the audience has actually quadrupled. And, so I think sports is sports. And the real question sports plays in our society is, can it settle people? Can it distract people? In the Gilded Age, which was this dawn of the telephone and lots of great technologies and incredible inequality and social strife and progressive era labor movements where people were fighting for a 10-hour day and then an 8-hour day, sports became this great pacifier. Sports became considered almost like an addiction, and it was dangerous to play it too much. Workers came out of the plants and played baseball or soccer on dirt fields, right? And it served this role. Cycling got really huge, and tennis was really big, and I think that so sports is this. It's always going to exist in this role. The question is, can it keep our world together? Can we put down our frustrations and just watch the Olympics or something?
Yeah.
And I don't think it can play this role in the way that it has. I think it's going to. We'll still watch it, but I don't think it doesn't stop us getting angry about climate change or stopping angry about things.
It's too bad because it's always been kind of a lovely, I like the Dodgers and you like the Giants, and we're angry at each other, but that anger is not going to lead us to fight,
right?
For 99% of us,
right?
And it does seem kind of odd too, as you kind of look at the landscape. People are really mad at each other, but it doesn't seem that it needs to be the case. That is, if you I don't know, if like climate change, like you could just be a big energy company and go, oh, well, we can get rich doing that too. Then, and
the big energy companies
make something else, and we'll rip you.
Well, the big energy companies have come out for carbon taxes. I mean, Shell and Exxon have, and at $50 a ton, and they're envisioning this future. I think. They could dominate the solar industry and the wind power industry or whatever. And it's basically they bought assets. Those assets cost 30 years to depreciate, and so they want to try to get a return on those, so slow it down a bit. But I don't see them not doing all that and having enormous power. They're probably the most deeply entrenched. The big food and big energy together, and big food really is big energy. We grow fuel now more than we grow food, and the anger. You say we don't need to be angry. I think this is the point. We need to be angry because it gives us a sense of clarity. It gives us a sense of control. It's filling this subconscious role for in a world where self-determinism is harder to find, like outside the valley at least, and even sometimes here. How do people feel in control of their lives? How do people feel like they're doing something? People don't want to be passive. Like it's anger is I don't have a problem with anger. Like anger is like manifesting this desire to not sit there and just have the TV beam stuff at you. And on some level, like people go around talking about all this generation and they're all addicted to their screens and this and that. And I'm like, man, when I just in 2007 when I wrote Nurture Shock, the average child in America watched 3.5 hours of television a day, 3 hours and 35 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And it's down to 20 minutes. So this sort of like sit there and we will tell you about the world way. And we've woken everybody up. And so they get angry. So whatever, that's better than being passive.
That's a really interesting perspective. Because it's true, people were just wasting their, sitting in front of the TV watching, less good TV probably than we actually have today.
Right, and they were watching all those commercials, and they were just being told what to buy. And it's like, I think it's like psychologically better and more healthy, even though people would say, well, they're using your phone to addict you to content and addict you to video games and addict you to clicking on the news. And I'm like, man, when did clicking on the news become an addiction? Like in 95, like you couldn't get a kid to vote.
Right.
You couldn't get a kid to know what climate, the equivalent of climate change was at the time. Right. And today they know everything. Like, and they're mad. That's way better than the passive world we had. And I think we reminisce wrongly about the world we just left behind.
So speaking of reminiscing, what do you make of, in this world, as a writer, books and libraries? Is the form of 200 to 600 pages something I should lament that kids aren't reading enough of? I guess they burn through that Harry Potter like crazy, but
right. Oh, yeah. So I don't lament anything. I'm not really sure what's happening. Libraries itself, I will just say, like, try to support all our libraries and do this and do that. And I like remember days when, like, I think of libraries like having one book. Like it'd have one copy of my book, right? And I remember being near City Center at this Banh Mi place, and this librarian from our sort of city hall library, central library, said, we have 83 copies of your book at our library, and they're all checked out all the time. I'm like, oh, libraries buy more than one book because there's a lot of demand to read. Like, it was really helping people who didn't have the money to buy books read them. It's great. Like, and so in our world, can people, libraries exist fundamentally to make it so that people who can't afford the $25 or $27, because they're expensive, books are so expensive, read it. Okay, good. Otherwise, the physical form, I don't understand. And books themselves, I really lost confidence in the form of book, about 4 years ago. My confidence has been coming back, but I was like, I don't know if I can write a book. I don't know if the world wants to read books. Like, but I do think that, and I think like everything I wanted to do, I was like, I wanted to put code into my books, and I wanted to put puzzles, and it's like, we can't do this with this paper stuff. But I do think that there's still this deep role for this sort of illusion of the mind where you deeply stay with something, but that's the same like saying, so TV series, the re-explosion of TV over movies, like, right. And essentially what it's saying is chunked 12-hour content is better than 93-minute content, right? What is a book? A book is chunked 12-hour content. So I think we shouldn't glorify books, and we shouldn't be sentimental about them, but we are in a world where people are saying, I'm willing to spend 12 hours and I need some rest. Like every day I come back and I spend an hour with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what is the work of, you're now at IndieBio, what is the work of IndieBio, and what are you working on?
So IndieBio is one of the accelerators in the venture firm SOSV, which runs 7 accelerators around the world, and is on SOSV 4 right now, and overall $550 million invested into 600 or 700 companies. So it's a very, very active pre-seed investor through the accelerators. And IndieBio is the eminent life sciences accelerator. So it's using biology as a technology to doing drastic, world-changing things in human and planetary health. So we were the dawn of the lab meat, the clean meat movement, and those companies originally came out of IndieBio. We make wood without the tree. We make blue jeans in the current class that don't use chemicals to dye them. We make bioplastics that are so compostable you could eat them. We make new food system solutions for aquaculture, for agricultural technology, and a lot of human health. So what's happening is there's in the medical schools and the research institutions around the world, there's an incredible proliferation of PhD scientists, and then they have nowhere to go.
Right.
And only 1/6 of them at most can be professors. And there just aren't enough professorships. So they're graduated, they're working as a postdoc, getting grants, doing research. And at a certain point, they uncover something amazing, and they're dying to race off and turn this into something.
Yeah.
And at the grant way of working inside an academia, that's too slow.
Right.
It's frustrating. So IndieBio exists to give them a first check of $250,000 and to get them out of this state, which I would call the vortex of despair, where they could raise a seed round if they'd done more science, but they can't do more science because they haven't raised the money. And we do just enough with $250,000. They come through a 4.5-month program, take about 3 to 9 months of doing science to get to their seed stage. And IndieBio has a follow-on rate of about, into seed stage, about 65% of the companies. So when I say it's an accelerator, a lot of accelerators just, they work with sponsorship money and it's marketing money, and it's kind of a loss leader for the deal flow.
Yep.
These are actually run as, like a real VC firm with TVPI and IRR and everything you need to kind of have.
And what do you think is the most transformative? I had Ryan Bethencourt, who's the Wild Earth CEO, on recently, and it was kind of mind-blowing how quickly meat, not from animals. So see, Burger King has a Whopper now that's made out of not animals,
right,
but tastes like meat.
Way more people have heard of the idea of cell-based meat than have ever tasted it. I will be clear, so that possibly could be the most dramatic change, because here's the thing: consumers, they're not just trying to eat less meat. That they might say that that's what they're doing, but that's not what they're trying to do. What they're doing is they're frustrated with the whole thing, the whole economic system, the whole base of agriculture was our economic system for so long, and people feel like that too has gotten super centralized and removed from our lives and become the basis of power. And in some way, by sort of say not eating meat, we are having an impact on that whole shebang, right? And it's serving our own psychological needs for control, for self-determinism, for making an impact. It's not just climate change that's wrapped up in this stuff.
And what else do you see? Is it psychedelic drugs? Is it medicines where somebody's actually going to cure some cancers? What else excites you?
Oh, well, what excites me, I'm working on a piece right now with Arvind Gupta, our founder, called the Blue New Deal. And they got the Green New Deal. And we're like, should it be Red Blue Deal?
It should be red, probably.
No? Let's go Blue New
Blue
Deal.
is probably good.
And, because we have a real vision around, I would argue that that a better healthcare system is biotech's equivalent of universal basic income. That even if, let's just put it this way, if you had universal basic income, $1,000 a month, half of it would go to your health care right out of the gate, right now.
Yep. Right.
And those costs are only going up. They've been suppressed a little. The growth is slower under Obamacare. All the fighting is over who's going to pay.
Yeah.
All the fighting. Yep. And I'm like, no one seems to be fighting over what we're paying for or what are the fundamental technologies that drive that care. So we look at a world with radically better diagnostics that can catch diseases way earlier before you can get into the late stages where they're treatable. And that's by not measuring, gross variables, vital signs like your heart rate, and instead measure and monitor the leading indicators in your body. And the leading indicators are exosomes and mRNA and really fine detail that we've only just recently learned to be able to see it all. And we also look at cures rather than treatments. So 155 million Americans have chronic disease. 75% of healthcare costs are in chronic disease. By delivering cells rather than drugs, the cells can put the drug factory into your body.
Right.
and you can have one treatment and not need any medicine for 7 years.
Wow.
Those kinds of things, radically different technologies that can really improve healthcare for all, are needed here. Shopping engines, right? It's the law in 2019 now that every hospital has to publish its charge master, its prices.
Yeah.
So they bury them they distribute them across all these like weird legal pages.
Yeah.
They don't want you to find it. But the truth is, like it's like airport travel in the 80s or something, right? Like we understand, like if you need medical services, you should be able to go online and see the prices of the different hospitals, and that kind of a thing as that's emerging is going to drastically give people a lot of sense of control and find cheaper prices, even if it's, insurance related. So I think that there's a lot of technology at the biotech level as well as at the IT level that can drastically make a difference here.
Yeah, I had like a nose surgery, and the hospital bill came, and it was like $75,000.
Yeah.
And then it was like minus $60,000 because nobody pays that.
Right.
But we've got that because somebody might for some reason.
Right.
And then it's like, and then your insurance company pays $10,000. It's like a 4-hour thing, by the way.
Right.
And then your guys pay whatever. You still owe us $2,000.
Yeah.
I was like, geez, like this is crazy. Like these numbers are like,
the numbers are just such gibberish, and they've learned to just create smoke screens and that pricing transparency. We got rid of the bane forever, which was pre-existing conditions.
right.
And now we need to get rid of in-network versus out-of-network pricing.
Right.
Just have your price.
Right.
Just have your price.
Right. Well, that's what I think that this first discount that I saw that went from like some really high number down to like, I wish I remembered what they called it because it was something very clever.
Yeah.
But it was just like nobody would ever pay that. And your insurance company told us to screw ourselves on that thing.
And your insurance company has its own price, and they pre-negotiate all these things with all these contracts. I mean, so I really am excited about our potential. And I know that a lot of people would say, well, technology and biotech have been offering all these solutions, but we are not getting healthier.
Right.
And you could make the same case about like energy markets. Like we've been promising technology, but energy is only getting worse. Greenhouse gas is only getting worse. No, solar power and wind power really do make it better.
Right.
And in this biotech space, there are new paradigms of technologies that truly do make it better and will change the system. They might take a lot of championing. In healthcare, it's with Josh McHugh, we had written The Future of Medicine, and we described it as the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. Like it just resists change. And everybody who works in healthcare walks around the hospital and the doctor's office saying, it can't go on like this, but it's never going to change. And they're stuck.
Right.
And I think that what changes that is not fighting over who's going to pay for it, but using better technologies to finally drive those costs down and make it more accessible, which is what technology has done in every other market.
Well, to really bring this home, what do you see in the future as these things converge? You've got the trends of automation, you've got biotech, you've got climate change. Like, how do you see it all coming together? And
you're right. So the convergence of and cyber terrorism and cyber manipulation, and all of these sort of seem to be aiming at 10 years from now.
Yeah, right.
12 years from now, they're all going to get so bad.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, is that in any one area, people feel like they have a take.
Yeah.
They sort of have a take on whether you think we're going to fix climate change or you don't, or it's going to get worse before it gets better. Like you have a take on inequality and automation. But the fact is, nobody seems to be talking about the fact that they're all happening together.
Right.
And they're will we not have nations? Like, well, how are we going to people often think, how are we going to solve these things? And I think it's more like we won't solve them. So then what will happen? And I think you'll see an enormous amount, essentially, of mutation. When any organism, be it ideological or biological, it encounters stress, it mutates. It does what I was talking about, that subconscious. People start to come up with lots and lots of random little bits of ideas that sort of emerge. And out of the combination of these things, we probably will do basic rational things. Like, well, it won't be like world changing, Kent. Well, like, yeah, let's tax carbon. Like,
Right.
It'll be like, yeah, let's make sure people have a little money.
Right.
Yeah, let's allow people to have health care for $9.99 a month or something.
Right.
Let's build these dorms out in the middle of the fields where people can live, and we'll make it kind of friendly and fun to be out there. I don't think it's going to be like cataclysmic. I just think that's what's going to take for us to do the things we all know we should do already.
So you're an optimist.
Oh, yeah, at my core I am. No, at my core I am. I mean, I don't think we're going to go extinct. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I worry about it.
That's kind of minimum optimism, I would say. that we're not going to go extinct.
Yeah.
It's kind of the least
I
we
worry
could,
about it.
we could do.
So there you go. But I do worry about it. I worry about, superbugs, and I worry a lot about the fact that, 15 times more the concentrations of oxygen is what we use to kill pigs today. Or sorry, not the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. So we kill pigs today at a rate of CO2 saturation. So we're not there yet. We're not all going to suffocate like pigs, but we're not too far off. I mean, right. I look at things like the Devonian period, when global extinction was caused because plants emerged. Before that was just like mosses, and they were 1 inch tall, and all of a sudden plants developed vasculature and roots,
right.
And they could cram their roots down into the rocks, and it released all this stuff, and it caused a massive global extinction. I'm like, if trees could cause extinction, then humans certainly could.
Yeah. Trees got nothing on us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ken.
I'm really glad you
it.
could do this.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right. My guest has been Poe Bronson, and this is a Something Measured podcast. I will see you next time.